Hi everyone, thank you for joining. Lovely to see you. It's a sunny day in the UK, so if you've taken time out from your sunny day, it's good to see you. As in the event description, Jakarta EE 10 is a major release and there's a lot to discuss with it, what we're excited about. I will hand over to those more expert than me to chat a little bit more about it. So today we've got Tanja and Ivar with us from the Eclipse Foundation, Jakarta EE experts. Ivar's also a Java champion. And then we've got Steve, who's our Payara CEO and also a key part of the Jakarta EE working group, project lead for GlassFish, for Jakarta EE Concurrency. So what this will be a kind of Q&A format. I'll hand over to Tanja and she'll direct a couple of questions that we've had to think about and we think you might find interesting. But also, if I can please encourage you to ask any questions you have, you can either do those just straight in the chat where you would just put in your nationalities, or there's a special Q&A function on Zoom, so you can pop them there as well. And at the end, we'll pose as many of them as we have time for. So if that's all good, I'll pass over to Tanja.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to the PR team for organizing this webinar and for the opportunity to talk about Jakarta EE. And before we kind of focus on 10, I just kind of wanted to give you a little run through how did we get here? So we all know Java is celebrating 25 years, and most of people hopefully here know that we're marking 20 years of enterprise Java. So with that, I will just remind you that Java EE with version 8 kind of closed its existence, and it was handed over from Oracle to Eclipse Foundation, to the Open Source Foundation, and to have this approach of vendor neutrality open source development. And if you can see here, Java EE 8 and 2017, 2018, slowly but surely moved to the Eclipse Foundation infrastructure. And at that time, we had the JavaX namespace with the new process, new licensing, new logo. And with the 9, we really entered the Jakarta namespace with Java SE 8. 9.1 was dedicated to Java SE 11, and it was very significant because we had multiple compatible implementations at the release time. Which is one of the differences from the previous development of Java Enterprise. And then finally, we are approaching Q2 and Jakarta EE 10. So with that, that's how we got to the 2022. And here today, we are to learn why is this the most significant release so far. So with that, let me first turn it to Ivar. Ivar, would you like to open the discussion and give us a little bit on a gist of the Jakarta EE 10?
Yeah, so it would probably be a good idea to just show what Jakarta EE 10 will be and what specs will be updated, so we kind of have a starting point for the discussions. So I'll just share my screen here. I only have 3 slides, so it will be fairly quickly. So I hope you can see this one. And this is all the specifications that are part of the platform, the Jakarta EE 10 platform. And as you see, all of the blue ones here, they're the ones that are updated in this release. And all the ones with a .0 behind the the version number, like authentication 3.0 and concurrency 3.0, they are major releases, meaning that they probably have some backwards incompatible changes. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but they are not necessarily compatible with everything backwards. All of these with a .1 behind are minor updates, which are backwards compatible with the previous version. We're trying to enforce the semantic versioning in this. And I see that we have a question here regarding config, and we'll get to that later. I'll just go through these and then we can press config. So the gray ones here are not updated in this release. They're still there, and there are important specifications, but they're stable enough, so they're not updated for 10. And if we kind of strip away a couple of these specifications, then you see what's part of the web profile in 10. And this is a true subset of the platform. So there are no additions here out of the platform. And but there are some changes since the previous version, and that is concurrency here. It used to be part of the platform, and I think Steve here was instrumental in advocating for moving it into web profile. So we'll probably talk about that later as well. Okay. And maybe the most interesting thing we're doing with the platform specification is to introduce a new profile, which is called the core profile. And this is yet again a subset of the web profile and the platform. And these are specifications that are targeting headless clients or microservices if you want. So if you're creating RESTful endpoints, these are specifications that are useful for that kind of thing. And the most significant one here is the one on the bottom, which is kind of yellowishy. And that's because CDI is not new. CDI has been there for a long time, but CDI Lite is a subset of CDI. And that's new, and that's kind of the core component of core profile. And we will, I guess we will talk a bit about CDI Lite and core profile later as well. But this is kind of one of the key specifications in 10 and in core profile specifically.
So Ivar, you already touched a little bit on the some of the key news, I would say, or features of the 10. Would you, Steve, like to comment on the top 3 in your view from Jakarta EE 10?
Yeah, sure. So I'll just pick up on what, first I'll pick up on what Ivar suggested around moving concurrency into the core profile. Well, I remember one of the key reasons to do, into web profile, not core profile. One of the key reasons for that was concurrency for some reason got left out. Concurrency has no other dependencies on other specifications, but it provides a lot of useful capabilities around wrapping current JDK concurrency primitives into a Java EE, Jakarta EE environment. So allowing you to propagate security principles and propagate transactional context and EGB context and all those sort of things onto new threads. So I have no idea why that wasn't originally in web profile. It was probably a timing thing. So it seemed appropriate to put that in there. So I'll pick that up. So for me, there's 3 things I think are the top capabilities that we're going to get with Jakarta EE 10. And again, I don't think Jakarta EE 10, the major capability is just features. Obviously, for me, I did a lot of work on Jakarta concurrency, so I'm going to pick up on that one first as one of my top 3 best Jakarta EE 10 features, because Jakarta concurrency has gone to 3.0 because of the major amount of change in it, not because it'd be backwardly incompatible. So we've done a lot of work and a lot of new features in Jakarta concurrency. We ported over a lot of work from MicroProfile around context propagation. So it allows you to have custom contexts that you can propagate from thread to thread, but it also built on the latest concurrency primitives that we get in the JDK. So you can then build completion stage, which is all in the Java EE context. You can use fork join pools, and you can even, it sort of brings it up to sort of a Spring-like functionality, and we have a cron-based scheduler in there, which is non-persistent, which can be used to kick off jobs within the container. So I'll pick up that one as my first top 3 feature, not necessarily the first top 3. There's a whole lot of work, obviously, on core profile, and core profile will be a major capability that we'll see how that develops. And I think core profile will enable new entrants into the Jakarta EE market. It's much simpler than some of the other profiles to implement, and therefore we will see other implementations coming out there. And I'm already aware of a few sort of projects out there that are targeting core profile that aren't the usual suspects, like Payara and people like that. And related to that is the fact that now in Jakarta REST as well, we have the SE Bootstrap API, which allows you to kick off REST from just Java SE, so you don't need a container to use Jakarta REST. And then finally, I will just pick up the modernization topic of moving the baseline Java version to Java 11. So that what that means is not that you can't use Java 17, but it means that you can use both Java 17 and Java 11 as your base, and you can certify. Payara, for example, can certify on JDK 17 and use that for new applications. So the APIs themselves aren't using specific JDK 17 features, but your applications that you develop will be able to use and run on JDK 17. So I think that's a key thing, to be able to run and test on the latest Java versions, because that's a lot of work had to be done, especially on the in the areas of the TCK, to get all that up to speed, built, compiled, and running on the very latest Java versions. So I'll pick up that as my third.
Okay. Ivar, would you have something different to say about your top 3?
Yeah, I get to pick 3 as well. So yeah, I agree with Steve on the Java SE bootstrapping of Jakarta RESTful web services. That's a cool thing. I think it has been around in the implementations, or maybe only in Jersey, but I know that both REST-easy and Jersey implements this now. So that will be a cool thing to try out to run the RESTful applications just using Java SE without the container. Another thing I think is the key feature is the, as Steve mentions, also the core profile and especially the CDI update there, where they replace a little bit of the dynamicity of CDI, where you have these runtime bootstrapping of things like extensions and stuff, and they have created a brand new programmatic API for CDI extensions, so you can now define these programmatically, and hence you will have the possibility to at compile time do the usual runtime steps, meaning that you also are possible to compile to native if you should want to do that. So that's a cool thing there. And also, to be a little bit original, I want to pick another specification. And I know that in Jakarta Persistence, they are adding UIDs and support for that. So if you're for any reason using UIDs in your database, or even as a key in your database, you can now have standard support for that in Jakarta Persistence.
Okay, good. So I think a lot of people are interested to find out if we have kind of plans and commitment for the regular cadence for the releases. do you think we can comment on that? We kind of a little bit see the pattern, but do you think it's firmed up a little bit?
Yes, I think what we're seeing now and the discussions in the platform team is that we want to find some sort of alignments with the Java SE LTS releases, because they seem to be the popular choice for companies around there to use, even if it's not any quality difference between any Java release and an LTS release, but for some reason the LTS releases are more popular, and that means that most the application developers will probably jump from 11 to 17 and then from 17 to 21. So it makes sense for us to raise the level of the APIs. Like Steve said, in 10 we have 11 as the API support, but for next release we probably want to raise that to 17 so we can incorporate some of the features that came between 11 and 17 in the APIs. And also we want to make sure that we can test this and run it and build application on anything later than 17 as well. So I'm guessing that we will have a 11 release around the time or a little after that Java SE 21 has been released, and that's not that far away. So.
What is the JDK's cadence at the minute? Because it has just changed, isn't it? I'm my ignorance now.
Yeah, it used to be 3 years, but now it's 2 years. So it will be 17, then 21, and then it will be 25, and then so it's getting shorter.
Yeah, I mean, I think we seem to be settling down. We have done Jakarta 8. 9 and now 10's coming, and I think we seem to be settling down to around that 18-month to 2-year sort of cadence, and I'm not sure that's planned, as the question was, but I think that is the reality. I mean, the reality also is that we are doing currently in Jakarta 10 a time box release, so it's not like we're just waiting until it's done and releasing. Every spec has to have everything ready for ballot by the end of this month, or they don't get in. So I think the fact that we've also moved to a strict time box indicates we are doing a regular cadence rather than just previously when it was whenever it was done, it was done. So my feeling is that we're moving to this 18 months to 2 years. And I also don't see pressure from outside to go any faster. I think one of the benefits of Jakarta EE is stability. And the reality is, with LTSs and JDK, is that most organizations are not geared up to consume infrastructure technology at a rate of 6 months, to roll out into their production systems. And that 12, 18, 2 years is a much better cadence for, significant users of these technologies.
Yeah,
Great,
and also one thing that we kind of encourage and want to see is that all the individual specifications that they move and can move and are encouraged to move at a faster pace. So in Westworld, most of the specs would have a .2 and .3 and release in between, and then when we decide to do a new platform release, we just gather up whatever is there and ready around that time, and we wrap it as a platform.
And we've also, building on that, actually released the platform as point releases. So we've obviously broken that taboo. So we could, if we needed, I think, and there was no major breaking changes and things like that, it's possible that you could see point releases depending on what people thought at the time, if there was something significant to push out there.
Right.
And you think you may see that some profiles may move a little quicker. So each profile is a project in its own right, so it doesn't necessarily have to align with point releases as the major release.
Yeah, similarly to individual specs as well, right?
Yep.
Okay, so now I think I would expect that people are particularly curious about the core profile. So why don't we talk about the significance of that a little bit more in depth, and then also touch on the maybe who do you expect? Steve, you already mentioned some of the implementations of the core, possible implementations of the core profile. But I think, you know, hoping for non-usual suspects, right, is great for this one. So why don't you start a little bit of a discussion on the core profile?
Okay, so the key bit really from my perspective of core profile, so Ivar showed which specs are in it, so I won't go and repeat that, but one of the fundamental differences between core profile, say, and web profile, which I think is significant first and foremost, is that it doesn't include servlet API. And what that means is it's not a servlet-based profile in the same way as web profile is. What it actually bases on, doesn't base on, but what it actually has as its user interface, or if you like, is Jakarta REST. So it's obviously moving into a REST-based profile based on top of CDI as a component model, rather than say EJB Lite, for example, which is web profile. So I think what core profile brings is a core base of, let's call them modern specifications, because they haven't been around for 25 years. And what that also then brings is a level of simplicity for implementers. And when I mean implementers of Jakarta EE runtimes as opposed to developers. I think, and I think what that does for the industry is allows innovation. There's not a lot of baggage to implement a core profile implementation. For example, you're not going to have to create a whole servlet container from scratch and carry on all the functionality of servlet into your container to get core profile certification. So I think that is great from the industry perspective, and I think we will see from the usual suspects and from new players implementations that do claim to be core profile compliant, because I think the barrier is a lot less. And I also believe you can assemble a core profile implementation from existing projects pretty easily, to be honest. So I think that's my key significance. I think from a developer perspective and from a Payara perspective, yes, it's more lightweight, but that doesn't really, for example, in Payara, it doesn't really make a lot of difference because web profile is pretty lightweight anyway, so the gains are probably marginal. And I think from a developer to target core profile, you probably need some other things. You'll probably need JPA or something like that to work with to actually do persistence into a database, or you may need some other specifications. So from a developer perspective, I don't see it as a massive game changer, but I do see it as a massive game changer for the industry, because I think it'll be very easy for other players to actually certify. And I think that'll drive competition is great. I think one of the things Jakarta EE will have in the future and has now, which is a great feature of it, is the competition. So we have a lot of vendors competing now in an open marketplace, in an open Eclipse Foundation, which is the great benefit of being in the Eclipse Foundation.
Yeah,
I'll cover that in my other question answers.
Yeah. I have to say we're extremely happy with our compatibility program and interest around it. So if you didn't have a chance to, please everyone check out there what's available in terms of the implementations. Ivar, would you like to add anything with regards to core profile, or maybe you can focus on just explaining a little bit more in depth the differences between, I know you already touched on it, CDI and CDI Lite, but if you wanted to add something else with regards to core profile, please.
Yeah, so I think actually one question that has been asked here is also, should I use, and I think Steve partly answered, should I use Jakarta EE core profile or should I use MicroProfile? And I would say you probably wouldn't use either of them, or you would always use Jakarta EE underneath. And one of the thoughts with the core profile is to enable MicroProfile implementations to be Jakarta EE compatible, because the way MicroProfile is today is it adds and extends some adds and APIs on top of Jakarta EE, some of the specifications, but they don't really have a way of ensuring that it's compatible with all of this. So core profile gives you a TCK that the MicroProfile implementations can run, and that makes you as a developer can more easily move your application between implementations. So it ensures portability. So it's not a, I don't think it's a question of should I as a developer use this or that. I mean, it's more of this implementation is compatible and is using these technologies underneath, and core profile packages those technologies that MicroProfile are built upon, and that's no coincidence. So it is a bit for that purpose that has been done.
Yeah, that's a great thing to mention, because we very often within Jakarta EE or within Eclipse Foundation and Cloud Native, we're always getting questions with regards to MicroProfile and Jakarta EE, but this is another way of showcasing how compatible or these two technologies are. They're definitely not far off, and work very well together.
But as Steve said, it's you rarely, core profile won't be enough for you. You're and neither will MicroProfile, because you usually would have some sort of persistence mechanism or use that. So it's more, you would probably use web profile with some MicroProfile APIs on top of it. So it would be a more, and that is how most of the vendors like Payara, Micro, and the others are bundling the things. So
would you mention any other vendors at this point that would touch on the, or rather implement and then therefore certify on the core profile?
Yeah, we haven't really got any kind of final commitment from who would be, but I would kind of suspect that Helidon would be a candidate. I also think that Micronaut will implement some of the APIs, but I'm not sure if they will be filing for compatibility. We don't really know.
Yeah.
But then most of the implementations that are implementing web profile today, it would be fairly easy to file for core profile compatibility, because there are no limitations saying that you cannot have more APIs. So I would guess Payara Micro would be a core compatible.
Yeah, I mean,
they just bother to run the TCK and submit.
Exactly. We will certify on it, but we will probably do it in Payara Micro. When MicroProfile came out, we did actually strip Payara Micro down just to MicroProfile APIs, but actually the memory and benefits were not really worth it. So we did actually have a implementation we shipped for a little bit like that, but we just stopped it because it was not really much of a point. But I think we will also, from a product perspective, and we won't do this on Jakarta EE 10 line timeline, but we'll probably have a different bootstrap type product as well, following some of the models like Helidon does at some point. And I think when people see what's required to certify and how they deal with things like packaging, I think then we'll know a little bit more about that. But I'm also aware of other, probably not vendors, but maybe projects out there that are experimenting. And I don't know whether they're hobbyist projects or serious projects or what they intend, but I know that you can probably assemble a core profile runtime with REST and Jetty and stitch these things together in quite easily. I don't know the compatibility requirements at this point in time, but it's probably quite easy to knock something up that would be compatible. And I think we'll see that happen.
Yeah, that's great. So let's just touch a little bit more on the features and updates of some individual specifications. You already, we talked about CDI and CDI Lite. We talked about just a bit on JPA, but what other individual specifications and their features would you like to highlight for people here?
Okay. I was actually going to cover a little bit on CDI Lite, so I'll just pick up something that hasn't been said.
Yeah,
One of the
do.
key bits about CDI Lite is actually because it answers, I think, Abhidip's question around Graal VM native image. So I'll pick that up as part of that. Is one of the key points of CDI Lite, and I'm no way a CDI expert here, is that one of the big differences is that it's, as Ivar said, it's targeting the ability to do only build time discovery of beans. So the purpose of that is to enable, I imagine, implementations like Quarkus to do Graal VM native image support on CDI Lite. So it removes a lot of the capabilities that require reflection and deploy time scanning of beans, such as portable extensions, and comes up with a different extension mechanism, which is similar but not the same. So that's one of the key capabilities of CDI Lite, is to enable purely build time analysis and compilation. I don't think it will ship with the actual spec, but I'm not an expert. So that's one. I can potentially talk, like I say, I've spoken about concurrency, so I won't talk about that, even though that's one I know the best. I know that, there's a question around JSF about what's the future of JSF. I'm not a JSF specialist either, but JSF is probably one of the most active specifications that is in the Jakarta working group. And they're doing a lot of work, first and foremost, to remove a lot of old stuff. And a lot of the focus on Jakarta EE10 is around simplification. It's one of the key points. So a lot of specifications are removing old deprecated and old capabilities. So from a feature perspective, that is one of the big things to remove weight, if you like, for old baggage. And so that's similar for the servlet specification as well, but in particular in JSF is moving a lot more on CDI support. So it's adding additional support for CDI beans and making that more first class and foundations of JSF. And so part of this removal is removing of JSPs and those areas. And then I know, as Ivar covered around JPA, there's quite a bit, again, of a lot of tidying up, but it is adding support for new UUIDs. It's adding new date time support, adding things into persistence QL. It's adding support for a lot more functions. And it's also adding support for expressions in conditions as well in criteria. So again, each one is mainly modifying and bringing up to date things that have moved on in the Java world and bringing that up to date for Jakarta EE10.
Ivar, would you like to add anything to this in terms of highlighting individual specs?
I think we've covered most of them. No, I'm not aware of anything we've missed. There is kind of one change also in CDI that they are doing, which is also in the CDI full part, and that is changing the behavior of the beans XML file. So currently it's, if you don't have a beans XML, then everything is injectable. And they're changing it to from this parameter all to the default be annotated. So in order for beans to be injectable, they have to be annotated with the CDI annotation, and that is also to facilitate for the build time discovery and not on a runtime with reflection. So that is a change that could potentially create some problems for people upgrading older applications if they rely on the behavior of an empty beans XML. It will mean that they have to add a beans XML file, so it's a very easy fix. But if they forget to do that, it could be a little bit surprising.
Yeah, and I think what we see a lot in specifications is in a general direction is more first-class support of CDI rather than having multiple component models that, things like JSF are more foundation, switching from their bean model onto CDI as a fundamental bean model. And we're seeing things like in concurrency, one of the things really is to build out capabilities that EJBs have, but allow those and create those on top of, or enable that on CDI beans. So for example, concurrency has asynchronous, which can then be added onto the CDI bean to run it on a separate executor pool. So similar to other specifications have. And I think it's not all there in EE10 to say, everything is based on CDI, but I think the general direction of travel for these specifications is heading towards that long-term goal.
Yeah, so we're moving from the kind of the pick an EJB and get everything to the smorgasbord of CDI where you have to build it yourself. So you essentially, you could build an EJB by just combining annotations within CDI, more or less. But it gives the flexibility to choose. And since we're in CDI, also the Jakarta REST specification, they had plans to get rid of their own injection, like at resource and whatever they were using for this release, but they decided not to do it now. So they have a 4.0 release of Jakarta REST planned that they will start working on right after 10 to also be fully CDI. So and there is one specification we haven't talked about, and that is security. And security is adding support for OpenID Connect, and that is something you probably could have done it previously, but now they have added support for it in the APIs. So that's also pretty cool.
Yeah, and we can see in the chat also people suffering from absence of beans XML, as you touched on previously. Okay, so one thing that I wanted to mention, and it seems that in some of the comments we have received, and it's a question on the Jigsaw modules. So there is a kind of desire in the community that have modularized projects. Would you comment on that at all?
Do you want to take this one, Steve, or should I give it a try?
I can start and see how you go. So my question often, sorry, my answer to often this question is, what modularity do you want? Because it's not clear to me what modularity people want when they raise this question. Do they want to assemble a Payara, or do they want the APIs to play within a Jigsaw environment? And that's a different question. So from the second point, I mean, to get into Jakarta EE10 as a spec, you have to have the correct Jigsaw module infos and those sort of things in your APIs now, I believe. I know we did work to get that in there, and I think it's mandatory. So the API jars that we'll be releasing should play much better in a Jigsaw environment, but there's nothing specific in the platform specifications to talk about how you would modularize a Jakarta EE runtime, or what that even means, because I'm not sure what that means. Knowing the dependency tree of Jakarta EE, and when we release Jakarta EE, we do it in waves because of the way specifications depend on other specifications. I'm not sure if anyone is ready to unpick that and understand what groups beyond, say, core profile, web profile, and full profile that you want. So I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but to release this, the API should play better in a Jigsaw environment because they should have the correct metadata within them now to declare what modules you depend on and what they require and all those sort of things. But we haven't done anything on modularizing the platform beyond, say, CoProfile. And then vendors will probably give you, as we've alluded to, give you options to add additional APIs on top of that because you likely need them to build your applications. Don't know if you've got anything more than that. That was an interesting question, and I'm never sure what the goal is.
Yeah, but I think you answered it very well, and the key is here. The question back is, what do you want modularity for? Because it's always like this when a new thing comes in Java, then everybody kind of drinks that Kool-Aid of modularity and wants to do modularity everywhere. And as you said, it doesn't really fit in today in the Jakarta EE environment, and we don't really need it either. So it's we have added module info in the API jars. If an implementation wants to go on the module path rather than the class path, they are free to do so. They probably will get into some problems here and there, but there's nothing preventing anyone from doing it. So yeah.
So I think maybe we should, just to make sure we're answering some of the questions from the audience, maybe it would be a good time to go over those. I know we touched on some of them, but nevertheless, why is config not planned for Jakarta EE10? And same question for NoSQL. So Ivar, do you want to take that one first?
Yes, config was originally planned for 10, but as Steve mentioned, it's a time-boxed release. We have to have it ready by May 1st, and they didn't make it, so they're out. So that is, if you want config in a release, you have to participate because we're pretty tough with these deadlines. If you're not making it, you're out, and that is that's the main reason. The reason why they're not making it and why they're late is that they are doing a pretty large restructuring from what we know from MicroProfile config. You will still be able to have this migration path, and I think the model and concepts from MicroProfile config will still be there, but they're making it more Jakarta EE friendly and adding some stuff that MicroProfile didn't support, and also ripping out some things that weren't that well thought out when in an EE environment. So they're doing some pretty decent work there, but it just was too much to make for this deadline.
What about NoSQL?
Yeah, so Nosql has been around for a fairly long time. They haven't released a version 1.0 yet. They have an implementation. I think they actually have a dependency on config on API level, which means that they are dependent on config to be there before they can finish their API. Whether that's a good idea or not, that's something you probably have to discuss with that team. But that's at least the reason why they're saying why they didn't make it. Also, there is a wish to have more diverse group of implementations. Right now, they have one implementation, and it would be nice for it to be incorporated into one of the profiles or the platform. I think we need to see some support from the vendors that they actually want this to implement this as well. So there are two things.
Okay, so let me move on to the next question. I think we touched on it a little bit, but nevertheless, for developing microservices, what should be used, Jakarta EE or MicroProfile? MicroProfile overlaps with Jakarta EE specs, and it has some of the really cool implementations like Helidon, Micronaut, or Quarkus. So Steve, do you want to, like, I think you touched on this already, but
Ivar did, I think, yeah. Okay, I'll probably reinforce some things that Ivar said. Basically, is obviously MicroProfile builds on Jakarta EE, and core profile will match the APIs from Jakarta EE that MicroProfile builds on. So it's not really, as we said, in either or. So MicroProfile has additional specifications which are good for certain microservice use cases. So, for example, you have health checks, and you have trying to remember them now. You have metrics and those sort of things, and those probably will never be come into Jakarta EE because they're very specific and to that use case, whereas Jakarta EE is more generic. So if you need those specifications, then you'll likely need MicroProfile. But that doesn't mean to say you're not using Jakarta EE, because Payara Server, Payara Micro, both MicroProfile compatible, if we can say that nowadays. So we have the MicroProfile APIs in those application server products. And if you're talking about microservices, there's no reason that you have to use MicroProfile to build microservices. If you only need Jakarta EE specifications, then you can build microservices on Jakarta EE, and you can run them on products like Payara Micro, which have small footprints and can run in containers, and you can run the full, you can run web profile applications on microservices on a Jakarta EE runtime without using any MicroProfile. So it's not, again, I'm not answering the question. I'm saying it's not an either or. MicroProfile builds on top of Jakarta EE, and you can run MicroProfile on a Jakarta EE application server, or you can build microservices in pure Jakarta EE and never use a MicroProfile API because they tend to add additional capabilities that you may or may not need.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's important to stress this out because that question really comes often. Another question, a note to CDI plus JPA. Is there improved CDI support? We're still running into problems injecting CDI beans in JPA entity listeners, converters, and etc. Stack is Payara and Hibernate.
I'll pick it up as the word Payara in, but I don't actually know the answer. So I don't know if JPA has done work to improve CDI support. Injecting CDI beans and JPA entity listeners seems quite a niche use case. And given we have Payara and Hibernate, but Payara ships with Eclipse Link as its JPA implementation, we have a very different stack there. So I'm not sure whether it would work on Eclipse Link or not, is the answer.
But I would also at this point like to invite all the people. You do know that each of the project has their team and their email address. And we also have the community mailing list. I would encourage all of you to send your questions there as well, and make your concerns or findings visible to the project teams and the community, and share experiences that way. So that's just a kind of side comment there. There is also, Marco continues also about CDI. What about the future of EJBs? Will there be a CDI alternatives for EJB features like stateless, asynchronous, remote EJBs and etc. Any comments there? Or this is again more specific to the team?
I have some knowledge on that one. So from a Jakarta concurrency perspective, so stateless is just adding stateless gives you a lot of different capabilities, and I believe that we will build out some of those capabilities. So for example, we have their asynchronous method calls. So we can do that now in Concurrency 3.0 by adding the asynchronous annotation. We have plans in Concurrency to add locking annotations. They didn't make it into 3.0 because we just ran out of time. We also have plans to add like an at schedule that would give you like, well, you can already do that to some extent, but to add capabilities that would give you the equivalent of an EJB timer, for instance, but on a CDI beam, non-persistent. I can't imagine that anyone is in planning to do anything about remote onto CDIs that isn't over and above, say, REST or something like that. So I don't see that feature being built, and remote EJBs may be the way to do that in the future. However, there is an early specification around support for gRPC, and we'll see where that goes, and that may solve that problem. So it could be in the future that at stateless becomes a stereotype that includes a whole bunch of other annotations, including pooling, which is not something that we've discussed. So stateless gives you pooling of beans as well. It's perfectly possible that that would be built out, but I think EJBs are still here to stay. So.
Yeah, also there is Jakarta transactions, so you can add transaction support if you want that, which is also something you get from stateless.
Okay, moving on to the next one. How will the OpenID Connect be different or interoperate with Eclipse MicroProfile security spec?
Yeah, so the MicroProfile security spec is limited to JSON Web Tokens and kind of propagating this token between your services and that authentication mechanism. So OpenID Connect would be a different authentication mechanism. So they will. I don't think there is any interoperability between them. I don't know if you can use OpenID Connect and then somehow generate a JSON Web Token that you're sending between the services, or how you do it. But so I think they complement each other. I say that, yes.
Okay. With many .0 releases in 10, will there be guidance for backwards compatibility, known issues from JSON?
There will, the different project teams will most likely include some statements about their break-in changes in their specification documents. On the platform level, I'm not sure if we will list all of them in the specification document or not, but I'm pretty sure there will be samples created, tutorials, and other help resources to get over the hurdles.
Yeah, and from a vendor product side, we'll also ship guidance and capabilities to help people migrate onto 10 as a platform. Don't know the details of exactly what we're going to do there, but we'll definitely be providing guidance, and we're also building capability to run older applications on 10 runtime as far as we can, and then point out where maybe manual changes are required. So there will be guidance from the vendors as well. I imagine others will do the same.
So I'll try to squeeze now a couple of more questions. We have just a few more minutes left. One of the questions is, what is the benefit of having MicroProfile config in Jakarta EE?
So yeah, we're not integrating MicroProfile config in Jakarta EE. We're creating a new config spec, which will solve the same problem as MicroProfile config did. So the benefit there is that we can have environment-aware configuration. So you would configure your application, build it one time, and when you move it around the different environments, it will pick up depending on which configuration sources you have configured your environment will. So your application will get one set of properties defined if you run it on your laptop, and if you throw it in a Kubernetes cluster, it will get the configuration from there. So the benefit of that is to having a platform-wide configuration mechanism that all the other specifications can use. So we don't have the different specifications figure out how to do the configuration. We will have one way of doing it.
Thank you. And now I'll squeeze another one. I think we have time for the last question. Will there be any effort in standardizing the tooling support, or will it rely on the vendors of the IDs?
I can give a simple answer that I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any effort to unify tooling support.
But at the same time, like if you have your favorite tools, if you don't see enough support for the Jakarta EE, please let them know. Keep us in the loop as well, because we would love to have as many tools, as many IDs supporting, and some of them are already doing it. So if something is missing and you notice it, be vocal about it, and let the community know, and let your tool vendors know about it as well.
And I think that's just to build on that point, Tanja, I think it's one of the key points of the change that we've had, is that now, we're hosted in your organization, the Eclipse Foundation, and therefore, you don't direct what happens in that sense. So if vendors want to come together, they have a neutral place where they could do that to sort of work and standardize tooling support. It's in the previous days, it was sort of directed by whoever was owning the specifications in those days, from Oracle and Sun. But now it isn't directed. And I think that's what people need to grasp as one of the key changes. So if we need these things and people need them and want them and feel passionate about them, then there's an open place to make it happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so I think we're at the top of the hour, even a little bit over, and time flew for me. But I will let you direct us. How do you want to continue, if in any way? But this was really great to see participation, questions, and so on. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Tanja, Ivar, and Steve, for providing such good answers. I can see people in the chat saying that it was appreciated, and we'll be following up with a video of this, so you can go back and watch if you didn't catch any of the answers. So I think we can end things now.
Yes, and the invitation for everyone, stay in touch. Go to Jakarta EE Connect page and see how you can connect with us. I'm sure Payara has the same message. You know where to find Payara team, and stay in touch. Yeah, please find us. Our handle is Payara_fish on Twitter, and we're Payara Services on LinkedIn. You can find our website as well. So make sure you stay in touch, and we'll follow up. All right. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.